Am I the astronaut for crying and ruining my husband's birthday weekend? For my husband's 40th birthday, I, 37 female, planned a small weekend getaway to the mountains. I booked a hotel and whitewater rafting trip, found a sitter for our kids, and filled the hotel with balloons. I got a cake from his favorite bakery and packed all of his favorite snacks for the drive. We've had a rough couple of years and haven't taken a trip alone together since we had kids, so I was very excited to get away and relax, just the two of us. The first 2 days of the trip were great. On the third day, I had planned for us to drive to a nearby ski resort and explore. Take the ski lift into the forest, and enjoy a late lunch before driving back home. The night before our last day, his friend called him and offered us an hour driving on his four-wheelers, and my husband replied, "That is way more fun than what we had planned." I can actually do this now. He never asked me if I wanted to switch the plans, he just did it. As we drove to the cabin to get the four-wheelers, I tried to put on a good face and go with the flow. It was his birthday weekend and I wanted him to have fun, but the more the day wore on, the more hurt I felt. I had to wait a long time for my husband to access the four-wheelers. I was dressed for exploring a ski resort, not riding in four-wheelers on dusty roads, and my clothes and shoes were completely filthy when we finished. I offered a few times to drive us to the ski resort, but he turned me down and said he didn't want to do that anymore. At this point, there was not much else for us to do in the tiny mountain town and nowhere to eat, so he decided to end the trip 4 hours early and head back home. I was crushed. I felt like he didn't even like what I had planned, changed plans without consulting me, and didn't want to be alone with me anymore. I felt unappreciated. I still wanted to preserve the weekend, so I didn't say anything and got very quiet. He kept asking me if I was okay and if something was wrong, and I would just say everything is fine. He kept pushing, and I ended up breaking down and sobbing, yelling that he didn't appreciate anything that I had done for him that weekend. He said that he had asked me several times what was wrong and that I could have spoken up at any time, and said that I really wanted to go to the ski resort, but I never did. I felt like when I offered to drive to the ski resort, that was a clear sign that I wanted to go, and I didn't want to push him into doing something he didn't want to do on his birthday weekend. We argued almost the entire drive home while I cried. I feel terrible for not keeping a brave face and for crying and yelling, but I am also still really hurt. I feel like this is how we will remember his birthday trip forever, that he was insensitive and we fought and I cried, instead of the fun we had the 2 days before. Should I have said that I was excited for the ski resort and told him no to riding four-wheelers? Am I the asshole for breaking down and crying and ruining his birthday trip? Interesting. So this is really tough. On the one hand, yes, it's his birthday. On the other hand, he, as a party in a married couple, has to be mindful of how he's being received or how his actions may have rippling effects on the relationship in his marriage. Has to at least be mindful of it. In this case, wasn't aware of that at all and was really only focused on the fun stuff that he wanted to do. He said, or OP says down in here, that he says he asked several times what was wrong, but it sounded like, at least in the initial telling of the story, that didn't happen until after everything was done. When he said, "I asked several times," and that she could have spoken up at any point there, made it seem like he was asking earlier on. If that's the case, that is a factor that changes things a little bit because it's an opportunity. If OP was given more opportunities to speak up and express herself here earlier on, that does have an impact. If it's an after the fact, like, hey, everything's done, there's no way to change anything now, but what's wrong? Then that's a different thing. I understand OP's position here, like not being conflicted. Like, am I allowed to care because it's his birthday weekend? I am hurt. And again, you can't be an asshole for feeling a way. You can only be the asshole for how you act on those feelings. I understand the position you're in here. So you felt something. Those feelings couldn't help but ooze through your expressions or your demeanor, I'm sure, but you didn't plan on confronting him. You plan on salvaging the weekend. I understand that. Now, what you did act on was after he pried it out of you. And that's something we have to consider too. This wasn't something you just belted out. This is something that he kept asking and asking and asking until you finally let it out. So he asked and come what may in that regard. So this is tough. I don't know if this is an everyone sucks here because everybody could have handled something differently, or if this is an NTA on OP's part, and husband probably should have done something differently by thinking about what his actions would cause here. Everyone should have communicated better. No one's the asshole. We might be there. Unfortunately, we don't have a rating for that. The closest thing we have is an everyone sucks here because everybody should have done something differently, which actually, if we're referring to the scale here, if you should have done something differently, that's an ASCON 3 thing. It's on the ASCON scale. It doesn't mean they're an asshole for it. They're a little bit of one because they both should have done it differently. Or did maybe OP is a 4 here because she could have done it differently. But the information was pried out of her, and maybe hubby in this case is a 3. Either way, if they're both registering on the scale here, I think we have an everybody sucks here because everybody could have or should have done something differently.